one thing that's coming to my mind with cultural differences is language, I guess. Not just the accent, but the way we speak. And I remember in Australia, they would always say, "That's okay." But not in the way that you would think. I would always say, "Thank you for helping me with this," or "Thank you for dinner," or, just being thankful for something, and they would say, "That's okay." And it always confused me, like, what are you talking about? It's okay for what? And another one, which was, these are all things that I'm remembering from the very beginning of my mission because I learned big lessons. I was like, oh. And one of the things was they don't really say what, because it's kind of rude to ask, like when you don't understand what somebody said or you didn't hear them properly, it's kind of rude to say what. It's more proper or common to say pardon or sorry, I didn't hear you. So usually just say, sorry, what'd you say? Rather than saying what, like an American would, just very blunt, kind of like that. And so that's something that I learned a lot from. I learned a lesson like that because my mom was getting mad at her child for saying that after I had done it. I was like, oh, sorry. And so Australia is pretty known for their accent and, little sayings like "good day, mate," and they say that very often. I heard people say that. And it was usually more of the Bogan people, which is, I would say, the equivalent of like a hillbilly or redneck type of a thing, a Bogan, and that would say things more like that, like, "Let's put another shrimp on the Barbie." They don't actually say that, but they do call it a Barbie. And they would say, I wrote a whole book of the terms that they used. It was really funny things that they would say. And they would call boys blokes. Like, "Do you see that bloke over there with that Sheila?" Sheilas were girls, just in general. Like, it's not like any particular girl. It's just a girl in general, a Sheila, which was really weird. I thought it was really weird. I didn't understand half of it. And one of the things I thought was pretty funny is when they'd be describing somebody that was kind of slow or, something like that. They'd always, similar things to what I'm about to say, they would say a couple sandwiches short of a picnic, or a sausage is short of a Barbie, or something like that. Something like to the effect that they're missing a little bit of something up in here. But they came up with so many different ones, and I can't even imagine, I can't even think of all of them. They were hilarious, really funny things like that they would always think of. And of course, in their accent, when the R sounds like an ah, you'd say, "Over in the car, it isn't far." Oh, one thing they do, it was really funny. Australians don't really answer your questions directly. They kind of answer it, I don't know, like when somebody would say, "Oh, how much is that?" They'd say, "Oh, it wasn't much," or, "Oh, it wasn't cheap." They wouldn't tell you the price. They'd say, "It wasn't cheap," or, "It wasn't too much." Like, "How far away is your house?" "Oh, it's not far. It's not far." Like, what? Just tell me, how far, 10 minutes? I don't know. And then they'd, describe directions differently sometimes as well. They'd say, they wouldn't tell you, to go on, streets. They'd tell you landmarks more. Okay, this tree, you'll see this tree over here, mostly in the bush, where I was serving in the bush. Okay, you'll see a tree that's kind of lopsided. You turn left there. Then you go, I don't know, go for, however far, and then turn left at this tree or at this little house, something like that, really weird like that. But, yeah. I've been having withdrawals from my accent lately. I've been really missing it, so maybe this is my opportunity to bring it back. I don't know what they would say. I don't know. I have no idea. They'd say stuff they'd say, yeah, "Oh, good day, mate. How you going?" Or no, I can't do it. It's too much. I can't do it. I'm sorry. I hate impersonating the accent. I feel so dumb. I did it, like, there were way too many missionaries in my mission that tried so hard that were American that just didn't have the accent, and then they tried, and it was so bad. That's what I feel like right now. I can't do it.
The city, very, very multicultural. I know in America we like to say we're a melting pot, and we are, but in Sydney, you'll go out and you'll see nationalities from every continent and so many countries, and it's really unique to see that. It's awesome, and you hear tons of different languages being spoken. You can walk downtown Sydney and you can get whatever kind of, except for Mexican food, which I love. You can get like almost any other kind of food. You can get Korean food, Japanese food, Polynesian food, just you name it, and you can probably find a place in the city where you can get it. And so that was awesome, and it opened up my eyes and allowed me to work with a lot of cultures. University of Sydney is awesome. I spent in my second area where we spent kind of in Sydney. We would go there a few times a week to contact, and a lot of Asians were there and would come and study abroad there, and it was just a really fun place where there were a lot of different cultures and a lot of different ideas, and it was very much a place where ideas were fostered. In Sydney, you have, the Opera House, which is awesome, which was in my second area, so we, on P-days and stuff, we would get to go up and do all the touristy things. So that was really cool. You walk out and you have, like, Aboriginals playing the didgeridoo, which is kind of this, like, long stick that you blow into and makes the kind of wailing sound. It's really hard to describe. You kind of have to listen to it. But you have Hyde Park, which is kind of like Central Park in New York, where it's just a really pretty park, and people just go there and enjoy it. And right across from Hyde Park is actually where the church has their kind of main office in Sydney, and there's like a little chapel that the YSA ward meets in. And so that's kind of is a really pretty place for the church to kind of be based in Sydney. Right across the street from Hyde Park, there's a really cool cathedral that a lot of tourists go to see. That's we went in a few times, and it's beautiful, stained glass, and it's a really it was one of the first things that was built there, and so it kind of harkens back to a lot of the Catholic origins that Sydney, that Australia itself was based on. And yeah, it's just a really fun melting pot and a lot of cultures. The cost of living there is very high. I know in terms of mission funds, we would be in the top 3 or top 5 consistently of like how much funds the missionaries would get, because it's expensive to live there. If you go to McDonald's, you're probably going to spend $10 at least. If you want like a burger, fries, and a drink, it'll put you out $10. And so that's kind of, it's a little bit different than it is here in terms of that. So our mission, the senior couple would pay the bills and stuff, but one time the bill got sent to us, and this was when I was 25 minutes outside the city, and it was like $1,200 a week for rent for a little 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of some kind of rundown apartment complex. And so it's expensive, but people get paid a little bit more. If you work at McDonald's, you're getting paid $15 an hour. So people they obviously find a way to make it work. I'd say overall the standard of living is pretty comparable to what it is here in the U.S., with a few kind of differences here and there. Not everybody has the latest iPhone, but most people have smartphones. So it's just kind of a little bit of a difference. But overall, I'd say the standard of living. And in terms of very general cultures, it's pretty similar to the U.S. I'd say you get almost as much difference in culture going from the West Coast to like the East Coast as you would going from the U.S. to Australia. So it's pretty comparable in terms of overall culture and overall standard of living. I'd say it's pretty comparable to the U.S. Transportation, a lot of people have cars, but the public transport system, especially in Sydney, is built out a lot more than it is in most cities in the U.S. You can get most places you want to go on the train and then buses, and so in terms of costs for that, it was around, so from like one of my areas to the temple, which was probably a 40-minute train ride, is about $10. So it's manageable. The cars people drive are a lot smaller than they are in the U.S. The roads are a lot smaller than they are in the U.S. You don't ever see anybody driving around an F-250, or if you do, it's going to be like a construction guy or somebody that has a real need for it. They drive on the other side of the road than we do in the U.S., so that provides an interesting learning curve for a lot of missionaries. That I luckily started off my area on a bike, or started off my mission on a bike for the first 6 months, so I kind of got my mind shifted before I had to jump into the driver's seat of a car. But it's interesting and fun and cool to learn about. There's a pretty big tourist industry. A lot of people go to Sydney just doing touristy things. So there's of course a ton of touristy things to do there. The big companies, you all see like Westfields around, which is like a mall. It's kind of like a brand of mall. I don't really know what to compare it to out here, but yeah, it's kind of a branded mall. So they employ a lot of people, and that's where a lot of people go and do their shopping are at Westfields. And then Vodafone is kind of like the Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, Sprint, kind of all combined out there. And I know that they cover a lot of like European countries as well. And so those are kind of the two big kind of all billboards you see all over the place are usually for like Westfields or Vodafone. They're very strict on the speed limit there. If you go a kilometer or two over, then you'll get a ticket. And so people actually drive like under the speed limit there. Like the speed limit there is the speed limit. You don't go over it. And versus Utah, you're going like 80 in a 75 mile an hour zone and cars are whizzing past you. There you don't want to go over the speed limit, otherwise you'll get a ticket. And so that's kind of interesting. And the speed limits are slower there, and so you kind of feel like you're chugging along when you think back to Utah or the U.S. in general. You just want to be considerate and drive. They lay on the horn a lot more than people do, I feel like, out here in Utah. And you don't want to get freaked out just because somebody honks at you, because they're probably not even that upset at you. You might just be, if you go like outside the lines at all, then you'll probably get, they call it beeped. They don't call it honk. They call it, they'll beep at you. So they don't see it as being as offensive, I feel like, as we do here. And so just little cultural differences in driving and transportation. And a lot, like I said earlier, a lot more people take public transport or take the buses. And that's kind of more of a built into the culture than it is here.
So it's, in the suburban areas, it's very, a lot slower. Life seems more kicked back, and a lot of the people are just like, oh, no worries. Just kind of go with the flow a bit. But if you've ever been to California, that's how it looks, is that you're walking down California. It's just so green. In the summer, in the spring, it starts to feel really warm and humid. In the summer is where it starts to feel a little bit like Arizona. But then, it's just so lush and beautiful. But it also can be very cold in the winter, where it was hard for me, that it just was humid cold. And it felt a lot like being in Arkansas or Mississippi during the winter time. You could just feel it seep through your clothes, like nothing you were wearing was enough. But for the most part, weather was great, and the people were great. You had the Turkish people, you had lots of Chinese, lots of Koreans. There was a lot of Polynesians, more than I thought would be there. Actually, I was surprised as a Polynesian myself to have been surrounded by so many that lived in Australia. But for the most part, it was actually a really good living area.
I didn't feel like I was in Australia sometimes. I just felt like I was in the USA. I would say that Australia is a very safe place. I mean, they don't have like any gun laws. They're like not allowed there. But even just the crime rate in general, it's very safe. Everybody's really loving. I think it's more towards the city that you get people who are fast paced and don't want to talk to you. But it's really good with, with transportation. They will always, we have a bus that will come for about, every 10 minutes. When you get to the city, it's every 5. And then the trains are very like quick pace. There's a train like every 5 minutes when we were serving in the city. Towards the outskirts, it's maybe every 30 minutes, every hour. But the people, just in general, going across those areas, as I notice that as the transportation, as the life, the cost of living just starts to boost higher and higher, it just seems that the people go that route too. And I wouldn't say they're mean, but it's just they're kind of there's like a little business scene everywhere, that the closer you get to the city, it'll just feel a lot business-like rather than homely. This is just a little bit of advice if you're coming to the Australia-Sydney North Mission. Don't expect to see kangaroos. You'll only see them in the zoos or when you're in the northern parts of the mission. But other than that, it's the Sydney South Mission that experiences more kangaroos and wombats than we do. It's more, I guess, westernized. There's more city and homes and things like that. There's not too many areas where it's just bush.
So it's a very, you have left and right wing here, and overall it's much more to the left over in Australia. And I don't know if you would say like socialist or whatever, but the government is a lot more involved. And for example, like we had the American Healthcare Act passed, but there it's kind of just been ingrained in their culture that if you're an Australian citizen, then you get like free healthcare. And so I had Australian companions that would just go up and like they had their card, and they just give it to the doctor and not pay anything for a medical visit. And that has like pros and cons, and you have like longer waits sometimes to have surgery and all this. You have all this debate, and whether or not it's good for here, I don't know. But I had never really met an Australian that was like unhappy with how healthcare was. They all like loved it and would talk it up. Like I said, the government a lot more involved. I know missionaries would go on the dole while they were on their mission. So they would like file for unemployment. Like this is Australian missionaries, and I think a few New Zealand missionaries would do it as well. But so they would like file for unemployment while they were on their mission, and then get like a monthly stipend from the government that would just go into like their saving account back home. And so they would go home having made like a fairly decent amount of money just from being unemployed on their mission. So there's like, I don't know if that would, you can maybe figure something like that out here in the U.S., but I think it's a lot more common for people to take advantage, and whether that's a good or a bad thing, I don't know, but they would for sure take advantage of the government programs a lot more than I feel like it's culturally common here in the U.S. Other benefits, I'd just say as a whole, Australians are a lot more laid back than people are in the U.S. They're not in overall as big of a hurry. They're just laid back, but they're also, I would say, and this is going to sound negative when I say it, but I don't mean to be, they're a lot more almost rude. For example, when you walk into a store here, most of the time you're greeted and asked if there's anything you can do for help, or anything they can do to help you. And there, it's not like that at all. You like walk into a store, and if you need help, then you go find somebody to help you, and they'll help you. But it's not like they're at the front door waiting for you to come in. People, like when you go knock on their door, it seems rude at first that they'll just like tell you to go away. But you start at least for me, I stopped seeing it as rude and just started seeing it as like they don't want you, like they don't want to waste your time, they don't want to waste their time, and so they'll just kind of tell you to go away. And it seems rude, but it's just that's what they think and that's what they tell you. And so I think it's culturally just a little bit different than we are here, where somebody comes and knocks on your door, and even if you don't really want them there a lot of the time, then you'll like find a roundabout way to tell them to go away and not be as abrasive about it. And so that's just kind of a few differences in culture. Also, kind of another thing, there's Aboriginals, like native Australians. There's a big push to try and a lot of them are in kind of slums, and they drink a lot. And there's a pretty big push in the government to try and get them back incorporated into society, so that's kind of an issue that they're trying to deal with over there. I feel like even a little bit more than we are with Native Americans here, even though it's some of the same issues that are common to both groups of people. The school there is handled, and they have their public education system, but it's actually interesting. A lot more people send their kids to private schools, and so that's. I feel like it's kind of big here in Utah to send your kids to private or charter schools, but it's a lot bigger there. I think that in general, though, Australians they're very positive about living there. They enjoy the benefits that they have. They don't mind paying higher taxes most of the time. I mean, you get the politics there too, but like they get more vacation time, I feel like, a lot of the time than we do here, and they get more benefits from the government than we do here. I'm not exactly sure what the minimum wage there is, but a lot of the base wages are quite a bit higher. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're working at McDonald's, you're probably making $15 an hour, or at the movie theater, like $20 an hour. So it's a lot different, and the cost of living is higher, but you get more money and you can manage that more how you like. Then again, to go to the movies, it's like $18 to $20, whereas it's $8 to $11 here or whatever it is. But it's a lot of things like that are almost twice as expensive than they are here in the U.S.